And now let's run.
We have already been traumatized by the fact that we have been exposed to the sounds of war.
When Artem hears the explosions, he gathers all his favorite toys and takes them out into the corridor. We cannot follow the main point of advice from all the psychologists who say that we need to change the situation, because we live in it and it does not depend on us.
On the evening of Wednesday, Ukrainians were making plans for an ordinary Thursday, but in the morning they had to wake up to the sounds of war. Russia's attack was insidious and unexpected. People did not understand anything. Their air raid warning did not work, so only cars reacted emotionally. Is it possible to imagine the state of parents who have to wake up their child with the words, "Get up, the war has started"? There will be still tears, fear and despair ahead. Basements and hunger lay ahead. Instead of plans for the future, there is the death of children, parents and friends. We still had occupation, exile and deprivation ahead. Awareness. For 2 years, rockets, artillery and mortars have been hitting Kharkiv and Kharkiv region every day and every night from the territory of the Russian Federation. Civilians are dying both physically and morally. Today, more than 9 million people in the country need serious psychological assistance. This is a very sad Ukrainian. There is a lot of work to be done in psychology. These were the first words we had from Olha Ridna, a psychologist and head of the Kharkiv-based charity foundation, Development and Social Justice of Ukraine. According to Olha and her colleagues, the reverberation of this war will be felt by the Ukrainians for generations to come.
The war that Russia has unleashed in Ukraine has many terrible consequences. It's not just the destruction of homes and infrastructure, it's the very severe psychological consequences that we will be treating for decades to come, cleaning up and so on. This is because we do not only receive a psychological trauma once, we are constantly in a war zone. We are all in the war zone now. This applies to those who are in the active war zone and those who are in more or less safe areas. People are constantly under tension, under fear. Fear for their loved ones, for those who are at war. And all these psychological problems are becoming more complicated. They are deepening, and this is very clearly visible both in children and adults.
The consequences will be terrible. They are already terrible. Children have stuttering, speech is disappearing. Amputations are no longer even psychology, but psychiatry.
There are ruined relationships. There is a loss of yourself as a person. There is self-isolation. There is alcohol consumption. There is violence in families. There is inability to raise your own children.
The list of emotional traumas that have disfigured people lived is endless. Loved ones are killed by Russian shelling, which is difficult to accept and survive. Housing is destroyed and lost forever. Refugees and displaced persons cannot adapt to new places. People who have been injured or taught by Russian soldiers lose the meaning of life.
There are many people with shrapnel wounds to their eyes and heads. And this is a very difficult story that constantly requires medical intervention. There are many women whose faces were injured by the debris. And it leaves very heavy traces on a psychological level. A girl who was beautiful has a disfigured face after being wounded. And she suffers, she cannot accept herself.
The consequences of Russian aggression are difficult to understand even for experienced psychologists.
The story that comes to mind quickly is when our girls, I won't say her name, She is an ordinary cook. An ordinary hospital that came under sniper fire.
Russian snipers were shooting medics. She was taken out by our soldiers.
I'm sorry, but every time someone who hasn't seen this, it's scary.
She was taken out by our soldiers.
Why don't say her name? Because her relatives are still there. Her mother and her relatives are under occupation. Russian snipers are like fascists.
How long can it take to rehabilitate a person who has experienced such things?
It takes years.
People develop suicidal intentions. There is complete apathy. One girl survived a rape. She rejected all in general. She had a fear of the opposite sex. The person refused to eat, drink, communicate, and even wash.
Was the girl raped by Russians?
Yes.
Somewhere in the occupied territory?
Yes. We have an acquaintance who survived torture, and the hardest thing is that he is an adult man. And it is difficult for him to admit that he is afraid to live.
Doctors are well aware of the terrible psychological consequences of the war for Ukrainians. Since the beginning of the invasion, they have been helping people and are already making plans to set up psychological rehabilitation centers. Yuri Ushakov, a psychologist and music therapist, provided us with a video that illustrates the conditions in which his patients are sent to a therapy session in Kharkiv.
Еще летит? Ну, сейчас это... А вот теперь побежали.
It is bitter to say and even harder to realize, our children are children of war. The fight is on to bring back a very child's smile.
There are 7 chocolates for Mom. Then, kids, did you write wishes for your mom? Yes. Well done. We roll it up and put it in a glass. Can I count them?
Of course, children suffer from the fact that every day we have rockets hitting us from Belgorod, from fascist Russia.
My friend's windows in the village of Zhukovsky face in the direction of Russia towards the border.
They shout, "Oh, they're firing," and we count. 1, 2, 3, 4.28. It was last year. Now it's 4 ballistic missiles. They are flying and coming down immediately. Do you remember when they were firing at exactly 11 p.m.? The children who were afraid went to the basement, into the bomb shelter, and the rest of us were counting these takeoffs, because you can see them, these flashes.
I feel very sorry for the children.
The child's organism is not formed. A child lives in the circumstances that adults give him or her. We understand that our childhood should not be like it is now. It should not be in the basement. A child should not understand where to run or hide. This is not the norm.
Inna described the situation with the children's psychological recovery as a ticking time bomb.
Anything can happen. It could be a broken life in the future. There may be a large number of children who do not want to communicate now, who withdraw into themselves. Then there is their own unsettled life, unrealized plans, ambitions, suicides. Anything can be a result.
During the first months of the invasion, Ukrainian children were afraid of shelling and did not leave their basements for months. Some still do not leave their homes today. Children are stopped by the fear of coming under fire on the streets, being killed or abandoned by their families while they are away. Children lose their social skills. They withdraw into themselves.
When you're in an emotional state, you ask something and they say, "I'm afraid. Won't anything happen to us?" It comes out anyway. Artem, when he hears explosions, gathers all his favorite toys and takes them out into the corridor. Were you afraid? To be honest, missiles and shells were flying and crashing in Dergachi so much that the house seemed to be lifted and sagging. I even cried, to be honest. I was afraid. Were you afraid for yourself or for your family? For everyone. My mom had another child, who hadn't been born yet. Mom and Dad would take us outside for a walk. But then we would get anxious again and come back inside.
According to doctors, art therapy is something that, along with traditional psychological support, can help Ukrainians overcome mental trauma. That is why the Dergachi community in Kharkiv region has created a so-called safe space, where children have a chance to forget about the horrors of war during art therapy sessions. Doma, as he is lovingly called in the family, is the eldest of 3 children. According to his mother Olena, he is not a creative person at all, but after bringing his younger brother to art therapy classes, he found an outlet for himself. Doma gives life by creating it from scraps of fabric and ordinary tow.
Dioma was fascinated by dolls. He really liked working with his hands. He was interested in it. He comes home happy. He is happy that he has succeeded in something. He returns home feeling positive.
Alina, the head of the group, sincerely believes in the success of art therapy for children.
I've always believed that art therapy is the first thing that can be useful for children. I mean drawing, sewing, doing something with somebody's hands. Especially in such conditions. In general, in any negative mental state, the first aid comes from art. What is the therapy? I think the process itself is healing. The process of distraction from the world around them, from real events. They are sitting here, meditating, doing only the work they like. They are constantly thinking about what the next step will be. They are engaged in creative fantasy work that distracts them from the environment. And this is how therapy works.
Why do you do it?
I don't know, I like it.
Why do you make puppets?
When I make puppets, I calm down, I do what I like to do. When I make puppets, it distracts me from the war, it calms me down. Here in the basement, you can't hear the alarm. I like that. Psychological depression is what our enemy is trying to impose on us. And when we show our people that they are alive, they have to get up and go. And show by their example that we are alive and will continue to live. We are alive and will continue to live.